There was something definitely wrong with me during that time to even stick through that. I think about that a lot, and I know that it was likely a lot of lack of self-esteem, but yeah, I kept showing back up for the money and the abuse. When I interviewed with this other company, second interview, I talked to my husband. I'm like, do you believe in me? He's like, I do. And I'm like, I can do this on my own. He's like, do you want to start your own company? I'm like, yes. And so it really was that. And then I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to Google, how do you start a recruiting firm?
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. My guest has gone from fired, laid off, to not making a placement for 6 months after she started her own firm, to $1.6 million in revenue after that. We're going to talk about the story of how all that came together, how she got fired, what she did when she got laid off, really what she did during those 6 months and just kept the faith, kept the work going. But then also we're going to talk about what changed to getting that $1.6 million and how she crushed it as a solo biller. And now she's building her own firm. So Sarah Englade, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Before we jump into this story, actually, we're probably going to weave this into the story. First of all, what are you doing now? And then we'll roll into how you ended up in this wonderful world of recruiting.
So what I'm doing now is I'm a solopreneur. I own a recruiting firm here in Houston that specializes in direct hire accounting, finance, and HR. And we're killing it. So life is good. Yeah, it took me a while to get here, but I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So take a few steps back in this journey. How did you end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
So it's been a while. So 12 years now I've been recruiting. And before I was a recruiter, I'm from Massachusetts. I was a licensed medical esthetician and I worked for a national brand in medical spas. Essentially, I was in sales, right? So I just had this thing inside of me. It was a burn to kind of get out of Massachusetts and try something different. I put in for a transfer, which got me to Houston, Texas. So I moved here 16 years ago from Massachusetts and was working for this medical spa for another few years. Left, went to a competitor. And that competitor, it was a great experience for 6 months. And then the last 3 months was scary because it was one of those companies that took off without checking its fuel engines to make sure it could. It was like a crash and burn. And basically I needed to figure out my next plan. So I gave my resume to a girlfriend of mine who just started in recruiting at a really big firm that I had never heard of up until that point, and gave her my resume and asked her to help me find a job. So that's actually what sparked the conversation. So Benjamin, I went into the interview and I'm thinking that I'm being interviewed for them to identify where they could place me, what companies would be hiring my skill set. But my resume was floating around this company. They were trying to figure out where they could place me internally, like what division, what part of Houston. So they had to really sell me on recruiting. And I just remember at that time just believing that, it was worth taking a leap of faith into something that I had no idea what I was stepping into, but I believed that it could be something amazing. So I took a chance and I took my first job in downtown Houston in temp staffing. So temp and temp to hire in the admin, HR, customer service space. So that was an adventure. And I did that for 2 years. I tell this to everybody, listen, if you're a new recruiter, if you can get into recruiting in the temp side and you can master temp staffing, you honestly can do anything. You really can.
I agree with you on that 100%. Real quick. So you got into that large company. Yeah. But one of the things that you did that I know I didn't do, and I know many other people didn't do, you actually grew to an executive level there.
Yeah.
Can you talk about even how you got to there before everything else?
So those titles, I think, are misleading. They decided to jack the titles up, I think, to gas us all up. I had an assistant VP and then VP title with the company. And it took time. I'm not going to lie. It took me, honestly, being a sponge. And this was back when we were on site 5 days a week. I didn't know what I was doing. So when I was there, I paid attention. I listened to everyone around me make cold calls, what they said, how they did it, how they overcame objections. And I spun it into my own, I guess, flavor and started to kind of mimic it because it was working for them. So it had to work for me, right? And I just kept going. I never quit. And I became a top producer from honestly just listening to others and the way that they did it and doing it eventually better than them, I think, and kept growing and kept growing. I think too that, my team, the people that were on my team, we really worked well as a team. So, they also helped to kind of elevate the whole division. But my first 2 years in staffing, I really did master it. I became very, very good. I became a top producer very quickly. And I was a division director and everything was going great. And then I got really bored. I was really driving to work, just God, I wanted to turn my car around. I'm like, do I really want to take calls at 6:30 in the morning because the receptionist didn't show up and, now they need this. And it was always pure chaos. And I was really burned out from it. So I remember calling my manager at the time and just saying, hey, when I get to the office, can we talk? And she was like, is it bad? I'm like, I don't know. It depends on how you take it. But it ended up being a great call or a great meeting. I got there, we walked right off the floor and I just said to her, I'm like, look, I'm burned out and I'm bored. I don't want to do this kind of staffing anymore. What are my other options? And she was like, you want to give accounting a try? I was nervous because I'm like, I don't have an accounting background. And she was like, you'll learn by, asking questions to your candidate. So I said, sure. And literally, I think it was the next day they had moved my division and I then became a staffing manager for accounting, like a transactional accounting, AP, AR, staff accountant, and senior. And I mastered that quickly. And I ended up growing into a division director there and ended up, taking over and actually was the manager over all of the inside recruiting for basically almost the entire city of Houston outside of 2 other divisions. So it was a cool ride. It really, really was. I was very, very good at it, but I did not fit in with the culture of this company from probably the very beginning. I really didn't.
Do you mind if I ask why on that?
Yeah. So the management style was nothing that I had ever experienced. I was a manager. So I worked for a company, like I said, in the med spa world, female dominated industry. And I was a manager for 6.5 years managing women. And it was a great experience. Never had any issues. I never had any kind of what you hear people say, oh, it's so toxic or drama. It was honestly great. And then I get into recruiting. And I don't know if it's because I wasn't used to the cutthroat nature of recruiting and the high sales competitive environment, but it wasn't for me from the start. I was really good at my job, but the way that I was managed was I was micromanaged to the fullest extent. And they also really managed us with fear tactics. And, every day I had anxiety going to work. I would just walk in and, you go to badge into the door and I'd be saying a prayer to walk in to get my day done because it was Benjamin, if I walked away from my computer and say my little DM thing went from active to yellow to then red, I would get a text message or a phone call within seconds hey, Sarah, how's your day going? What are you doing? Where are you at? I'm in the restroom. It was bizarre.
And weren't you a top producer?
Yeah, I was. I was a top producer, on a scorecard at the company that I came from. We had weekly scorecards that came out for basically the United States for everyone that was in the division. And for years, I was at the top, within the top, whether it was the top 5 or top 10 for years. So I knew what I was doing and I was very good at it, but it was never enough. It was never, never enough. I remember even one time I had gone to, once a year, they have this big event that they send top producers to. And I had gone to this event. And you're there in Vegas. It's an awesome, awesome thing. You work for this, right? You've got 4 days off from work where you don't feel the stress. You actually feel appreciated. And I came back from that and I remember being asked, how come you didn't hit your interview numbers? Why didn't you hit your goal for, your placement goal? And I'm like, I was in Vegas. They're like, well, you're going to have to make that up next week. It was very nothing was enough. It was super intense. And it was a lot. We had high turnover because of it. I mean, there was something definitely wrong with me during that time to even stick through that. I think about that a lot. And I know that it was likely a lot of lack of self-esteem. But yeah, I kept showing back up to, for the money and the abuse. I just kept showing up.
Well, and let me just kind of dig into this a little bit because we're definitely going to talk about how you were absolutely crushing it, $1.5 million with your own business. But You also took this job and you didn't have a college education. Do you think that was part of the reason why you stuck there?
Oh, 1,000%. That was probably that, and the fact that I was making what I thought at the time was an insane amount of money. Like the amount of money that I was making at that time compared to family members and my closest friends that had degrees, I was, doubling or tripling their income. So for me, I'm thinking, okay, I can't leave this job. Like I don't have a degree. If I left this company, where am I going to make this kind of money again? And I was even told this and sort of brainwashed by management at this company that I would never be able to make that kind of money again going to another competitor, because the company that I was at was the best and the biggest. And, you wanted to work there, right? And so there was a lot of that, but 100% the lack of a college degree and just my lack of confidence because of that was a leading reason why I stayed, for sure.
And let's kind of fast forward again. You got fired.
Yeah.
Getting fired, getting laid off are some of the most pivotal moments in somebody's career. And getting fired is even harder. Like what happened there? Like walk us up to that, walk us into that, and then let's talk about what happened after.
So I definitely, towards the end of my time there, I became like a shell of who I am today. After you work in such a toxic environment for so long, like I had golden handcuffs on, I wasn't leaving. But I was miserable. And I think everyone around me could tell. I definitely was taking on toxicity myself. I had these walls up. I was unapproachable. I was not the easiest to work with. And a lot of it was because, management did not like me. And I knew that. And I think I had been isolated by them for so long. And I just felt manipulated a lot. And I was in defense mode a lot. I was not very pleasant. So I can say now, looking back on it, I played a big part in my firing, but I got pulled into an office on a Tuesday and after lunch, and I was told there was the manager that fired me, and then there was a witness, and I was told I was being let go because a week before I had told a colleague at a happy hour that I didn't want to be your friend. So that was the reason they gave me, and I can't make this up. I mean, that's what they told me. It's crazy. And I just remember sitting there, Benjamin, the only thing that came out of my mouth during this entire firing was, okay, that's the best I had. A lot was going through my head, but really what I was feeling was, honestly, complete relief. It was weird how it hit. I thought that I was going to be like fight back or say something back or fight for my job. I didn't do any of that. I was like, okay.
I think this is absolutely strange because the company that you were at, the company that I was at, had very high turnover. So I completely understand. I got sat down a few times and get to spend more time at happy hours. And I'm like, I don't get paid for happy hours.
Yeah.
But I was just like, everybody wanted the camaraderie. And I'm like, the camaraderie isn't helping my spread. So that's just the way I looked at it back then. But talk about, excuse my language, a shitty way to go.
I know. I'm like, that was the reason you gave me. I mean, I think it would have been honestly wiser of them to just have been honest in the meeting to say, listen, you don't like working here and we don't like you working here. We know you're really good at this, but you need to go do this somewhere else. I think that would have been the honest way to actually handle the conversation with me versus you told a girl you didn't like her at happy hour and, based off that, today's your last day, which was the most idiotic and stupid thing. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But again, I was so relieved. When I walked out, no joke. So you can't leave the room. It's the most humiliating thing in the moment to be fired. It really, really is. You sit there in a room. I had this manager across from me, just hitting her little, the forms you have to sign, your separation forms. And she's really hitting it hard. And then she looked up at me and she said, I'm really disappointed that I had to drive here and do this today. I mean, I said nothing. She had to keep making it worse. You can't go in the bullpen. So once you're fired, they don't allow you back in the bullpen. So somebody has to go and empty your desk and fill your boxes. And so I was there for over 6 years. So everyone knew me as a top producer. So when I tell you people were tripping out because I was a top producer, they were tripping. My phone was blowing up. I hadn't even left the building. And I have other recruiters being like, what's going on? Is everything okay? What's going on? They're packing your desk. So the receptionist comes over who I knew and I loved her and we just had a good relationship. She hands me my 2 boxes and she looked like she was about to just bust out crying. And I just remember looking at her and I was like, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And they were kind enough to let me go out the side door. So I went out the side door and kind of snuck out the building. I wasn't even out the building. I'm holding 2 boxes and I'm also on my phone. I called my husband and I'm like, I just got fired today. He's like, there is no way you got fired. And I'm like, there is, because I've got my 2 boxes and I have been terminated. So yeah, crazy.
We've had some conversations before this, so I know where the story's going. And, Sarah is just talking about like a little bit of the shell of who she was. But I think a lot of it was the environment. Personally, I think it was the environment that was there, because we're going to jump into the fast forward a little bit. Like, oh my God. Like, so if they wanted you to just work somewhere else, they would have let you just work somewhere else.
Yeah, they didn't.
Like, talk about the non-compete, since like non-competes are a huge issue.
Yeah, huge. So when we first get into recruiting, right, you sign a non-compete. They all have them. I was new to recruiting. I signed the non-compete because I didn't really care and I didn't know better. I didn't like research what this actually meant. I just didn't. So, I get fired. I'm fired from my job. They take my job away. No more paycheck for Sarah. But they wanted to make my life hell, to be honest with you. They really wanted to stick it to me. And so part of my non-compete was that I could not work for a competitor in Houston for 12 months. So immediately, as I'm trying to look for jobs, I had 6 job offers in 2 weeks from being fired. And I had to keep saying, I was fired. I was fired. Like, me sharing I was fired in these interviews never held back anybody from giving me a job offer, because a lot of them knew the company that I came from, and some of them actually knew the person that fired me. I mean, I was given a lot of grace, and I think because I was honest about the whole thing, it was for a lot of people unbelievable, but a lot of people actually understood it. So I remember when I finally landed a job, I had gone to lunch with 2 of my ex-team members from my company. I loved these girls. These were my friends, like my actual friends at this company. And so we had lunch, and I told them I got a job. I didn't tell them where I got a job. I didn't tell them really any details about my job. I just said, I'm good. I'm excited. Within 24 hours, Benjamin, I got a FedEx envelope at my front door. It was overnighted from the legal department of the company that fired me, with a copy of my non-compete, CCing the manager that fired me on it, reminding me of my obligation to my non-compete, accusing me of soliciting, listing the girls' names that I had gone to lunch with, and letting me know this was my warning that if I breached my non-compete again, then they were going to pursue me in court. Like, crazy. So I didn't solicit. You're just sending letters to honestly scare me, and it did, and harass me. And this is the biggest problem I think with non-competes, is that companies will use them against their biggest competitors. If you are a competitor of theirs, they're going to stick it to you. And then you hear people say non-competes don't hold up in court. Well, you're held up in the court system until they come to that conclusion, right? So it can be really expensive. It's insanely expensive. They do it to drain you. They really want to make your life hell. So like for me, I respected the terms of my non-compete, which is why I accepted a role with a company who created a role for me in Memphis, Tennessee, so I could continue recruiting and doing what I love and not be brought to court for it. So it was just a crazy experience, honestly.
These companies that hire so many like people straight out of college or earlier in their career, there's a ton of people that leave these companies, and they don't chase every single person down.
They don't. They pick and choose. I do believe that it's the people that are their biggest competitors. And honestly, too, like I said, I wasn't well liked. I mean, they wanted to fire me because I told a girl I didn't want to be her friend. And then they're like, we're really going to stick it to her and we're not going to allow her to work. Like, they were just being really nasty and mean, to be honest with you. Getting that letter, it confirmed everything that I felt for years about this company. It just did.
All right. So you literally picked up your entire life.
Yeah.
And you moved to another state.
Basically, yeah.
So you could keep on recruiting.
Yep, I sure did. So that was my only option, right? So I accepted a role with the company. So when I was going through the interview process, I was going for feels. I really was, because I was in my field. I was feeling a certain way, and I really wanted to join a company that believed in culture, that was fun, that didn't micromanage. And I found this company that it was exactly that. And what sold me was 3 of the founding members of this company had started this company at that time 17 years before. So part of their onboarding was really cool. They shared videos of the company. And one of the videos that was shared with me was the CEO at the time. And he's in there and he's thanking people. He's like, I thank everybody for standing by me this entire time, for supporting us, for believing in our mission. And he got choked up. And he goes, I didn't want to cry in this. I wish I didn't cry in this. But honestly, watching it, I choked up at the same time. Like, I was really feeling not so great during that time, right? Trying to figure out my next move, and just seeing how like passionate about the people that he was. Like, he was so passionate about them. I was like, I'm sold. So yeah, that was the company. They created a role, and 3 weeks out of every month, I had to go to Memphis, Tennessee. I worked remotely for 1 week. I did that for 6 months. So I was fired in 2019. So in April of 2019 was when I was fired. I started my new job in May of 2019. So I had to do 6 months in Memphis. Then I was done in Memphis. So then they moved me. I had to then remove myself, and I had to go to Dallas. So then I was in Dallas for the remainder of my non-compete.
And they like chased you down a few times. Like
Yeah.
people were like, you were telling me offline that like you were getting messages and people were constantly looking at you. Like,
Yeah. They didn't
like,
leave me
bro,
alone.
like that's just insane. The culture that they're still trying to chase you down so much later. Like,
Yeah.
like
After firing me, it's like, you think when you fire someone, why do you care so much about them? Like, you just fired them, move on. Like, why do you have to stalk them on social? So after I got fired, I decided to put some boundaries down. And my boundaries were, I was blocking people that I worked with that I didn't have a good relationship with, including the people that fired me and the girl I said, I don't want to be your friend. You know, I went ahead and blocked them, right? But I had a ton of people from that company constantly viewing my LinkedIn profile, but they wouldn't DM me. They wouldn't text me. They wouldn't say, hey, how are you? We're thinking about you. Nothing like that. They were just constantly checking to see if my LinkedIn had updated. I didn't update my LinkedIn until I think May or June of 2020. But I remember one day I was packing for a vacation with my husband. My phone goes off. I've got 4 different people texting me. One's an unknown number. I don't even know the number. And all of them were like, they found you. Management is here. They're saying that based on your activity and some posts that you liked on your LinkedIn, that they've narrowed down that you're at. They said I was at a deco. They were like, that you're at a deco, and they're here slapping, high-fiving each other in damn near tears. They're like, we found her, we found her, we found her. And I verified with all 4 people. I said, I just want to verify, like, you're 100% sure they're saying a deco. And they're like, yeah, they're like, she's at a deco. And I wasn't. So I was like, keep looking. So they never really found me, but they never stopped stalking me. They were following me on Instagram. I had a branch manager's mom following me on Instagram. My old manager's kids would follow and check my page. It was just, honestly, it was harassment. And it was just another form of, honestly, like what I had experienced when I was there. So yeah, it was a crazy toxic environment.
we're going to move on. But if you're one of those people that was checking up on Sarah, I get it. It was part of the culture and the environment that you were in. But like looking back on it now, like what do you personally think about that? If you were one of the people that was requested to follow Sarah, is that the kind of person that you really just want to be? Is that the culture that you want to work in? Is that the type of recruiter that you want to be? Oh no, let's move on. We're going to talk about the good stuff because we are going to talk about making money.
Yeah, we are.
Before that. So you literally lived at other places through your non-compete.
We did.
Then once your non-compete was done, you were finally able to move back to the city that you've been probably like you're still paying bills in.
Yep.
Like you've had to like.
Had a house here. Yep.
Let's talk about getting laid off to launching your firm.
Yeah. So the pandemic hit in April of 2020. My non-compete was over, but there were no jobs. Everyone, it was the pandemic. It was pure chaos. Nobody knew what was going on with the world. And so my company ended up going through one round of layoff, and I knew I was going to get hit eventually, and I did. In September of 2020, I was laid off due to the pandemic. The great thing and the biggest difference here was this company that created the role for me. I actually had a non-compete with them too, Benjamin, and that non-compete was for Memphis, Tennessee, Dallas, and Houston, and they released me from my non-compete. They were
wow.
We want you to
leadership.
work. Yeah, it was so different. It was awesome. So they allowed me to fly. And so the day that I was laid off, we're recruiters. What do we tell all of our candidates? To lean into your network. I leaned into my network and I saw who was in my DMs, and I had another big, global firm in there, had set up an interview that day. And then the next day I had a video interview with them, and I'm like, you know what? I can do this. Like, I can do this on my own. I came from a huge company that I was with for 6.5 years that was heavy into metrics. So I was like a machine. I understood the science behind and like the foundation of recruiting very, very well. The second company that had laid me off, they kind of taught me that I was entrepreneurial because that company, they didn't believe in metrics. So they were super core, values driven, but they were just like, just figure it out, be happy here. It was like, hey, how is anybody making money here? So you really you had to be entrepreneurial spirited. You had to be self-driven. And so I learned that I was that. So when I interviewed with this other company, second interview, I talked to my husband. I'm like, do you believe in me? He's like, I do. And I'm like, I can do this on my own. He's like, do you want to start your own company? I'm like, yes. And so it really was that. And then I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to Google, how do you start a recruiting firm? And then I reached out to my parents, my in-laws, and my grandmother and sold them. I had to go to them and I'm like, would you like to be an investor in my company? I'm going to work for myself. And all of them said yes. Like, it was immediate. I really didn't have to sell myself too much. They saw how hard I worked for years. They believed in me. And so they all invested in me. There was a person here in Houston. I do want to plug him. So I don't know if you know him on LinkedIn, but Jeremy Jensen, he runs a search firm here in Houston called Encore Search Partners. And he is somebody that when I got fired from Robert Half, I actually DM'd him on Instagram. Now, I've never met him, but we follow each other on Instagram and on LinkedIn. And I had DM'd him on Instagram, I think, when I got fired, just saying, hey, can we go and, have lunch? And I'd love to pick your brain. And he goes, listen, I'll save you the lunch. If you're trying to pick my brain about whether or not you should go back into agency or go work for yourself, listen, you can either come work for me and make me a bunch of money, or you can start your own company and make yourself a bunch of money. And I was like, and that I never forgot that he said that, but I wasn't ready at that time to go and start my own company. I didn't have the confidence. I just got fired. So after I got laid off, I remember, doing my own Google thing. And then I hit him up again. I said, hey, I'm going to start my own company. And he actually was the one that was like, hey, you're going to need, he told me what I'm going to need. You're going to need an invoice. This is the invoice I used when I first got started. You need your W-9, and if you need anything else, you just let me know. So he actually we have never met, but just out of the kindness of his heart. And I think he knew that I was such a hard worker. He wanted to see me succeed. So I had a little bit of that mentorship in the beginning, but I had a lot of just heads down hard work and free marketing classes I took on.
So we're going to get into this in a few minutes, but you had somebody that worked at another firm that could have easily capitalized and tried hiring you that just said, excuse my language, listeners, fuck it, go for it.
Yeah, he did. He sure did. He's like, you can come work for me and make me money, or you can just go work for yourself and make yourself a bunch.
So you launched your own firm, and real quick, you had people believe in you, but like so many other recruiters during that time window, went to go look for another job. Why didn't you do that? You had the two paths. Why did you jump down the entrepreneurial path?
So I chose this path because I really wanted to to be honest, it was selfish in the beginning. I wanted to create a safe space for Sarah to be myself as the recruiter that I knew I could be. When I worked for a big company, the first company, we had scripts. We all sounded the exact same. We couldn't have our own personality. We couldn't have personal brands. We couldn't have opinions. And then the second company, you could have all of that, right? But then there was certain things because it's their company. You have to just behave a certain way or say things. I started Monarch because my mission is to put humanity back into hiring. And that has always been my mission. I could finally say it out loud. And so I wanted to create a company where I could do that. I could do it my way. And I didn't have to answer to somebody else. So it was really more of a safe space for me. And because I believed in it so much. That second part is probably, once I ran the numbers, Benjamin, and was like, okay, this is how much I was making this company. And this is how much I took home. And this is it's endless what we can make in recruiting. And I was just like, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to make way more money and I'm going to be able to be Sarah and I'm going to be able to do this myself. I just went all in.
Awesome. So you went 6 months without a placement.
I sure did.
6 long months.
Yep.
Before we jump into what you did, the things that you were doing, how did you keep yourself going during that time of not making placements?
God, that was a long 6 months. And I was talking about this recently. I knew what I was doing as a recruiter, but when I, started the company, I didn't have business development experience per se. I did a little bit of BD work for maybe a year and a half or two in my entire recruiting career, which I had 8 years before I started Monarch. So I didn't really know how to do business development. So Benjamin, it was difficult. I'm trying to find new clients. It's during the pandemic. I started a recruiting firm as a solopreneur during a pandemic when nobody even had jobs. It was crazy. It was a crazy idea. But I think really what kept me going was I don't have any quit in me. So when I set my mind to something, like starting a project, there's nothing that's unfinished here. I finish everything I say I'm going to do. And there was no plan B. I didn't want to go back to agency. I didn't want to pivot my career. The plan was for this to work. And, we were always told, if you compound your activity, if you compound your effort, hard work pays off. It will pay off. And I had to keep reminding myself of that because, self-doubt, it creeps in. The negative self-talk, I was hearing those voices, that bitch voice that like David Goggins always talks about. Yeah, it was right there a couple times a day, and you have to tune it out and you have to make a choice to tune it out. So I don't know. I think I believed in it so much and I knew it was going to work. I didn't know when. My husband was very supportive during that entire time. So he wasn't putting pressure on me. I was putting a lot of pressure on me. So I think between my discipline, my belief in myself, and about a dozen crying sessions in the shower, it just all worked out.
What were some of the things that you did during those early days to get new clients, especially because you didn't have the true quote unquote business development training?
Yeah, I didn't. So during that time, so my niche is accounting and finance and HR. A lot of those folks found themselves, especially in like a manager level, like the decision-making level, a lot of those people were furloughed or laid off. So they needed help finding a job. And so I actually really was spending a lot of time with those people. I didn't realize what the payoff was going to be until much later, but those folks are who I was doing interview preps with, reformatting resumes for, optimizing LinkedIn profiles. Like we were spending a lot of time together, and I was doing that for lots of people during that time because, I was doing BD work, I was MPCing, I was doing cold calls, I was doing all of the things. But then, from a recruiting perspective, I was trying to get leads, but nobody was hiring. So when I'm recruiting in all these people, there's not really any leads that they're really sharing. But what they were sharing was that they were struggling, that they felt lost, that they were depressed. And so for me, I spent a ton of time with those people, making sure that I was giving them every bit of knowledge I had and every ounce of energy I had to help them to be able to compete, have the best resume, have the best optimized LinkedIn, know how to answer these questions regarding their gap of employment, whatever. So really what happened was those people found jobs, not through me, because I was still like this new firm that didn't really have many clients. And those people were decision makers. And when they were hiring, they reached out to me. My first client, though, came from traditional old work, the work that people don't want to do, like in recruiting, they want to take like the easy road, to success here, but it's the same activity you have to do. So I was doing MPC calls. I was doing ad calls. I was just placing cold calls, doing intros. I'm doing all these things. I'm recruiting, following up on leads, creating content. So I had never created content before I started my own company. And I became, obsessed with it. I knew I needed to create content and post on LinkedIn every day because I needed to build a brand for myself. So I continued to do those things. And then finally, a woman at my best company now, they're still my best client. They were my first client. And she reached out to me and said, hey, I have a controller position. This is my first opportunity. I'm like, oh my God, it's 6 months in. I really needed this. She's like, can we jump on a call? I said, yes. We jumped on a call at 7:00 the next morning, and she asked me questions about my core values. Like, it was a very different vetting call. She's like, talk to me about your core values. Why did you start your company? And then she was like, look, you align with us. Like, we want you to be entrepreneurial spirited. Like, your mission and what you do aligns with our company. I said this, and no one's ever had a vetting call with me like that before, like ever since then. It was like the first time, and it was so unique and it was so cool. And then she says, Sarah, how many controller positions have you filled since you started Monarch Talent Solutions? And I was like, 0, because I hadn't. I was honest. I'm like, I haven't filled any yet, but I really hope you give me an opportunity to change that. And she did.
I feel like a lot of other recruiters might not have said 0.
I know. They would have lied. I know. We're taught that. I did not. I'm very honest. I'm honest all the time.
It's very rare for a client to be like core values. And, maybe this is, you planted so many seeds in the soil, in the ground. Something came up and was forced to come up. Curiosity, like, what are your core values?
So we have, I think, 8 of them. So they spell out humanity. So like a few of them, like hold yourself to the highest standard, united in freedom, make a difference through your work, act with integrity and honesty, improve by 1% every day. So it's all about really, like, to be honest, being the best version of yourself, being the best version, showing up, doing the right thing, never making a major decision in a valley. That went there specifically for me because, Sometimes I find myself, if I'm overwhelmed and, stressed out, because we're in the business of people. People are stressful. So sometimes things happen in business and, I'm that person that can react. But that's a big value that we have for me, because it's like we don't make decisions in valleys. We take walks and we rethink these things through, because the first thing with us is relationships first. Like, we don't want to be a transactional firm. We just don't. I want high caliber clients that utilize me. I don't want the companies that are using every firm in the city of Houston. Like, I get those companies reaching out. They're like, hey, can you help me with this position? It's been open for 4 months. You've got 10 other firms on it. No, like, I don't want to work that. I want to work like high caliber roles with good clients. I want to fill positions that are career opportunities, not roles that constantly have turnover. And I really don't want to work with companies too that are like, this is how we've always done it. Well, that doesn't work anymore. So for us, what I provide, it's more of like that white glove service. I want to have clients that respect that and value that. So those are the companies that I target 100% when I'm doing my marketing and my business development.
So you started the company during the pandemic. You didn't make a placement for 6 months.
Yeah.
If you were starting just today, because you spent a lot of time with doing like leadership calls and coaching calls, if you had to start over today, what would be some of the things that you would do to get your first few clients?
To be honest, I don't know if I would do a single thing different, because everything that I did, it just turned into something so beautiful. I failed so much in the beginning, Benjamin, because I didn't know what I was doing. I don't love cold calling. I don't love doing all of that stuff. I'm still weird about it. I feel like I'm still cringe. I'm still trying to learn that, right? 3.5 years, almost 4 years into business. But every single time I've like flopped or like had that moment when I'm like, oh, why did you do it like that or whatever? I've learned so much from those that I don't know if I would change anything, because I wouldn't want the outcome to change. This has been the coolest ride, the most humbling ride. I don't even know who that was that worked at the first company 4 years ago, Sarah, 5 years ago, Sarah. Like, I'm not her anymore. Like, I don't know if I could be this without everything that I had to go through to get here.
Okay, so we're now jumping on the accelerator.
Yeah.
What did you do to go from that first placement to that 1.5 million?
Oh, it was a fun ride. So first and foremost, I don't think people really love my answer on this, but it's the truth, and it's the honest truth. You've got to make time for this. There's not enough time in the day. You know this. Like, I think sometimes people come on and they talk about being like, I'm a $1 million producer. You hit $1 million one time, and then that's like, your coin. You say you have flexibility, but you don't. In order for you to be successful, you have to be completely obsessed with this business. So I did everything that I was supposed to do according to what I had learned from a lot of different people. I created content every single day. I made sure that I was connecting with new people on LinkedIn, but specifically building my network for accounting, finance, and HR in Houston. That was it. Like, the majority of the people that I am connected to on LinkedIn are those people, my buyers, my candidates. That's who I want to see my content. That's what I want circulating around to those. I was showing up to every networking event. I was going to on-site visits. So if a client called me and said, hey, we have some openings, this is the role, I'm like, can I stop in today? I can be there in an hour. I would show up. I do a lot of different things too. I actually still write handwritten letters to clients. Like, we have like a brochure we send out with writing. So it's 7 to 9 touch points. I'm specifically obsessed with this. I have 50 companies that I target. Out of the 50 companies, you're only making like 80% of your income from 20% of those companies. That's really what it is. So in order to get those, Ben, you've got to do it all. You've got to cold call them. You got to email them. You got to follow up with a LinkedIn request to connect with them. Then you got to send them the voice memo on LinkedIn. Then you got to send them some mail, and then you get on a call with them. And when you show up, this is the beauty of showing up to meetings. You don't just meet them. They introduce you to everybody. So when I'm being introduced to not only just the controller, I'm there with the CFO, I'm there with the finance manager, and they all see me, and they all see my enthusiasm and my honesty. That's really what was, I think, the biggest differentiator, was that I'm willing to show up and go above and beyond, but I'm also willing to be very honest and educate you. So there's been a lot of those calls or meetings that I've been in where companies were like, we've had this role open 1.5 years and no other recruiter has said these kinds of things to us about the market. I'm like, you guys are paying way under. Nobody wants your role because it's not attractive. I'm going to change this and this if you're okay with it. And I'm going to get your position filled. And literally within 4 weeks, filled, because I'm willing to be honest. So I think it's like the going above and beyond. I was willing to do it. I brought on some contractors too because the volume of job orders started to just come in. It was insane because I'm doing all the things and we made a ton of money. It was insane. So my first year of business, I only had, paychecks for 6 months because it took me 6 months to make money. About tripled my best year at my first company. The company that said you'll never make more money, tripled it.
So the last 6 months of that year, you tripled what you did at that company.
Yeah, my best year, I tripled it. Yeah, it was crazy. It was awesome. The next year, I couldn't even believe how much money I was bringing in because it was insane. I mean, our revenue was like 1.6 million in a year and a half. We were just freaking, grinding and killing it and enjoying it and having a good time. Like I have 1099 contractors. And listen, we were having a great time too. We were taking off on a Tuesday. We were getting champagne and nice meals and it was great. But we were working our asses off for those. And I think everybody too that was a 1090, everybody that's worked for me came from other firms mostly. So they understood this and this felt like for them finally freedom and for us to really deliver and for us to be able to stand up for ourselves too. Because sometimes I think recruiters, we get shit on a lot. We get shit on by the hiring manager. If we don't do a good job, it's our fault, the candidate. So now it's like, okay, our standards are very, very high. We don't accept people talking to us a certain way. We say no to a lot of business to say yes to the right business. And we do not work with people that nickel and dime us. Our fee is our fee. We do not discount.
Do you have different setups with your fee, or is it just like, this is what the fee is?
My fee is my fee. So the only time my fee changes is if I go into like a position that's paying over $200,000 for a base salary. So if it goes up and it's going to be a harder position for us to fill. So my standard fee is 25% at a net 10 term. So they have 10 days to pay me. I've had to change that only, I think, 3 times. And I won't go to 30. I'm stingy. They'll say, we have to do net 30. I'm like, net 25. So like, I'll negotiate all that because it's like, we work our butts off here, and I'm a contingent firm. So we want our money to come in and we do not refund. We have a 90-day guarantee, no cash value if the candidate doesn't work out. This has only impacted me one time. And we have a one-time refill to give our best effort to refill it. So there is that. But yeah, no, the only time I'll change it, and I usually will go up to 35% if the salary is like 200 and above. And that's never been a problem because they're kind of used to that.
I love that. Well, before we shift gears to the quickfire questions, we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that you want to kind of like jump into or talk a little more on out of everything we've covered?
I think the biggest thing that, with my experience being fired, then laid off, and then starting a company and becoming successful, there's a lot of people like me. I don't think my story is unique. I don't think that a lot of people talk about their stories of being fired or laid off because a lot of people think that's something to be embarrassed about. But all I can share about it is the more you talk about it, the more the shame gets taken away from it, and you can reinvent yourself an unlimited amount of times. If you don't like something in your life, change it. So that's what I would leave with that.
Awesome. Well, jumping over to the quickfire questions, what advice would you give to a recruiter that's actually just getting started in our industry this year?
If you're getting started as a recruiter in 2024, good luck. So 2024 has been a crazy year and recruiting, this is actually probably a great year for somebody to get started in recruiting because they get to feel the low. And so in our industry, it's ebbs and flows and you're not going to always feel like you're on cloud 9 all the time. So good luck in 2024 as a new recruiter and don't quit. Do not quit.
Same question, but for somebody that's just getting started with their business, what's the number one piece of advice that you would give?
Just getting started in recruiting, like a recruiting business.
Like they're launching their own business.
Do not compare yourself to anyone else. Do not do it. Don't compare yourself to other people's success, and you need to get mentors. You need to lean into self-development and getting mentors. When I first started my company, I actually reached out to a couple of people locally here in Houston, outside of Jeremy, a couple of other folks, and was like, can we go to lunch? Like, I'm starting my own company. I saw that you had yours, and they were unwilling to help me. They did not want to have lunch with me. They viewed me as competition. They weren't very friendly about it. They would answer things like my DMs, like, sure, period. Like 3 days later, I'm like, yeah, no, like, I'm good. So what I ended up having to do is really seek out some mentors. And so I have quite a few now and I lean on them. And I think if you're starting a business, you can't do it alone. You're going to have a lot of questions. You're going to have a lot of ups and downs. So, I have mentors for, running a business. I'm part of an entrepreneur program called Arte Syndicate that helps me with, running my business seamlessly. I have a mental toughness coach. I actually have a meeting today to potentially, join and get a recruiting mentor, which I think is going to be very valuable for me. So I'm looking into that. And then, of course, lean into other people that are willing to help you. Like one of my best mentors is Brent Orsuga out of Scottsdale. He's been amazing. And we met on LinkedIn 3 years ago. And I'm inspired by him every single day. And he gives me really sound, good advice.
That is awesome. What has been a good book that has helped impact your career?
So I'm actually a pretty avid reader, so I have a lot of books, but The Compound Effect was the first book that I picked up for self-development back in 2018. And The Compound Effect, I've read it like 5 times. I love this book. So huge impact on me. The Sales Bible by Jeffrey Gittimore. I'm actually now picking it up for the second time. So I'm reading it again. I actually really loved that book. And then the last book would be, it's called Relationships First, and Emily Frisella wrote it. And I went to one of her Women in Business summits last year. And I think that's when the book came out, and her values and what she talks about aligns with me. It's all about the relationship first. People will never forget how you made them feel. So you've got to start with them.
When it comes to like your own personal success, so you crushed it at your first firm, top biller, got VP level. Second firm, you were doing so well that they kept on moving you around until the pandemic. You had an incredibly tough 6 months, but you completely turned it around, and you didn't just turn it around and have some success and take your foot off the gas. You kept on going.
Yeah.
What do you think has been like a personal, huge contributor for your success? Like what's driving you?
So it's funny because my mental toughness coach is wanting me to like really identify my burn and what's like that burn that fires me up every day to do this. I'm still having a hard time identifying that specifically, but I really think that for me, the way that I was raised, I do actually contribute that mostly to my level of success today. Like, I was raised in a very humble home, lower middle class Massachusetts home. My dad worked for the United States Postal Service. He still works for them. He won't retire. My mom is close to retirement, but probably won't retire either. And she worked for a high school. And so we didn't really have much. And so I always had to work. So we had everything we needed, but the things that we wanted, I had to work. So I've always had a work ethic. They instilled that in me. So I think that, watching my parents and being raised by 2 people that never called out of work ever, like would drive in the snow with 2 feet of snow to go to work. Like they never called out. A stomach ache wasn't keeping my dad home. A headache wasn't keeping him home. Like I was raised with that. So I think that really being around people like that have such strong work ethics, and then being on my own, like I moved away at 23 to a completely different state. I don't have a college degree. And so for me, I think it's always been that I am not going to quit and I'm not going to fail. And it's that knowing that I'm not quitting on myself. I have no plan B and this is going to work. So I do think that, the way I was raised and the fact that I do believe so much in discipline. So I really contributed to all of that.
I'm going to jump back over to a question before I go into my favorite one. You're crushing it. What does your tech stack look like?
I'm like super basic. So I really am. I use LinkedIn Recruiter Pro now. I had Lite, but I like the Pro version. I think it's great. I've compared that recently to a couple of other AIs, like some of the new AI sourcing softwares that have come out that people are hyping up, and they're okay. They're okay, but I'm finding kind of the same talent on LinkedIn Pro. So I haven't really had much to change there. I have a basic CRM. I have Bullhorn. We're getting ready to launch automation. I've never even had automation up until this point. So yeah, like I don't know if I have a favorite. Canva, because I create my marketing there. I don't even know.
And she does a great job with like her videos and stuff. So make sure you hit the follow on her for Instagram and stuff. But okay, so real quick, you don't have like an automation program, but you build that much. Like, how are you keeping track of all your touch points?
Like I told you, like the first firm that I was at, if we didn't log it, it didn't happen. So we had to log our activity. So I'm no joke. I log every conversation. I log everything. Now I know that there's software out now that you can just talk and it does it for me. And maybe I'll get that because I have a lot of conversations. I don't know. But I get the basics in the system and then I set a task. So that's how I know how to keep up my activity because I've got to hit numbers. I have metrics that I've made for myself. So
what are your metrics?
Well, my metrics are a lot lower, but I have them written here. So Canva, again, I'm like, no joke. I measure everything I do. I have to do 5 social media posts. So I post Monday through Friday. I do 10 ad calls a week. I do 25 MPCs. I try to pull in 5 new recruits a week, which is kind of up now because the market is so wonky. So I'm kind of up to like 12 recruits a week. It's wild. I need to log new contacts. So I've got to get 5 new contacts in the system. I've got to be able to have connects and emails to 40 people. So it's a lot. And then leads, 5. I need to get 5 leads. So when I'm talking to my recruits and I'm saying, where are you interviewing? How long ago was that? Who did you interview with? That's a lead. I got to follow up on it. So 95 is my goal. And I'm going to be honest with you, wearing all the hats, it's hard to hit 95, but I usually do crush it and usually bring in about like 75 connects a week. Yeah. So I'm that recruiter that people probably are like, God, that's so old school, but like it works. So I'm sticking to it.
Awesome. So jumping fast forward again to my favorite question, and we're going to ask this twice. If you get the chance to sit down and have a conversation with yourself back at the early days of your recruiting career, the start of it, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself it gets better. It gets better. And also this environment is not normal. Like, because I didn't know any better. But I think that would really be it. Like, it's going to get better. You think that this is good. You think you're doing a great job now. Just wait.
Same question, but the start of Monarch, a month or 2 into Monarch, with where the story's at. If you had the chance to sit down with yourself, give yourself advice, what would you say?
God, that's a really good question. During that time when I first started, I think that I was scared to do a lot of different things during that time because I was new. But I think I probably would have said something like, it's a saying, honestly, now that I think about a lot. And it says like, go for it because missed opportunities hurt way more than rejection. And I think that if I had believed that back then and knew that, I probably would have made 2 million, in a year and a half. But I think it would have been that, like, just go for it because those missed opportunities are going to hurt you way more than rejection.
Where do you see yourself in Monarch 5 years from now?
I don't know. That is the question, Benjamin. I'm kind of in a little bit of like a crossroads here with myself, which is why I really want to get a recruiting mentor, somebody that can really help to mentor me and maybe help me figure this piece out because do I want to scale it? Is that an option? I did at one point and then I didn't. So where do I see it? Still around, still kicking ass, still, humanizing, hiring here in Houston, helping as many people as possible. We have a huge brand now on Instagram. So our content on Instagram goes pretty viral, which is great. And we get a lot of really good feedback. So we know we're helping people. We know we're helping people maneuver the market and navigate it and be successful as they're going through it. So I still want to be a big part of that. But I hope that I can break more into speaking and helping, really to spread the word too and to help as many people as possible. So I guess in 5 years and 10 years from now, I hope I'm still able to help as many people as I am now, if not more, and making an impact.
For the listeners, if they want to follow you, how can they do that?
LinkedIn. So we are heavy on LinkedIn. You can follow my personal page, Sarah Englade, and our company page, Monarch Talent Solutions, but we are pretty big on Instagram. So Monarch Talent HTX is our handle, and we're also on YouTube, just under Monarch Talent Solutions.
Before I let you go, we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that you would love to share with the listeners?
Yeah. If you're a recruiter and you've been thinking about going into business for yourself and you're scared, that's normal. Everyone's scared initially when they think about it, but the sky is the limit and everything. There's no reward without some risk. And when you place a bet 100% on yourself, you're going to win. You're going to win. You're going to be successful. And like I said before, you can reinvent yourself however many times you have to. But if you're going to go into business for yourself, be the best at it. And don't skimp out and don't ever compromise integrity. Just be the best, treat the people the best, and go to bed happy at night knowing that everything that you gave today was your best.
Absolutely love that. Well, man, I'm so excited that I got to share your story. There are so many people that struggle to make their first placement when they make that jump themselves. We all hear the stories of somebody that made 5 or 6 placements their first month, but that's not normal. It's not normal. So I'm glad that you came on and shared your story. And from 0 to 6, or from 0 all the way through 6 months to just absolutely crushing it. So I can't wait to see where the future goes. And for the listeners, I want 2024 to be your best year yet. Keep crushing it, guys. Thank you for joining.